Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabalaba Girivardhati Gopi Janabalaba Girivardhati Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tera Manachari Jai Hurad Amadava Kunja Bihati Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihati Gopi Jana Balaba Girivardhati Gopi Janabalaba Girivardhati Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Banachati Yamuna Tira Banachati Jayarandho Madhava Kunja Bihati Jayarandho Madhava Kunja Bihati Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Paramahansa also Tada Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharishi Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shadwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopika Raghunath, Shaimakunda, Radhakunda, Giri Govardhan ki jai, Vrindavanam ki jai, Mathuradam ki jai, Jagadanda Swami ki jai, Yamunamai ki jai, Shrimati Tulasi Devi ki jai, Saveda Bhakta Vrindi ki jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya. Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharni Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Dejatarni. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam today, 10th canto, 52nd chapter, text 31. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Santusto Yarhi Varteta Brahmano Yena Kenachit Abhyamana Swad Dharmat Sa He Ashakila Kamaduk Santusto Yahrivarteta Brahmano Yena Kenachit Ahiyamana Swadharmat Sayasyakila Kamaduk Santusto Yahrivarteta Brahmano Yena Kenachit Ahiyamana Swadharmat Sayasyakila Kamaduk Santusto Yahrivarteta Brahmano Yena Kenachit Ahiyamana Swadharmat Sayasyakila Kamaduk Okay. Santushta, satisfied. Yarhi, when. Varteta, carries on. Brahmana, a brahmana. Yena kena chit, with whatever. Ahiyamana, not falling short. Swat, of his own. Dharmat, religious duty. Sa, those religious principles. He, indeed. Asha, for him. Akila, of everything. Kamaduk, the mystic cow, milk for fulfillment of any desire. Translation, when a Brahman is satisfied with whatever comes his way and does not fall away from his religious duties, those very religious principles become his desire cow, fulfilling all his wishes. So you can repeat, when a Brahman is satisfied with whatever comes his way and does not fall away from his religious duties, those very religious principles become his desire cow, fulfilling all his wishes. And Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur comes to the Brahman is unwavering in his dharma, swatarmat avyamana, that dharma sa yields all desires. And I'm just going to read the next verse because it's like a companion verse to this particular verse. It deals with a Brahman who's not satisfied. Asantushto sakrilokan apranotyapi sureshvaraha akinchananopi santushta shete sarvanga jivara. An unsatisfied Brahmana wanders restlessly from one planet to another, even if he becomes king of heaven. But a satisfied Brahmana, though he may possess nothing, rests peacefully, all his limbs free of distress. And the purport is, those who are unsatisfied feel distress throughout their body, becoming subject to many diseases. A satisfied Brahman, however, though he may possess nothing, is peaceful and calm, and there is no distress within his body and mind. So in the first verse we read, there's an interesting word here, which is swat or swa, dharmat, which means, the devotees translate that as religious duty. So I'm going to really talk about what dharma is and what a Brahman's dharma is today. So the word dharma doesn't really mean like rituals or particular activities directly. It comes from the root dri, which means something that sustains. That's a very interesting concept. So it's like, sometimes I think of it, it's like the order of the universe, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead's desires for the universe and for everybody within the universe. And there's an interesting statement that's sometimes made that if one takes care of Dharma, then Dharma takes care of one. What does that mean, really? I was thinking about a mundane example to understand this particular point. That mundane example is, let's say you have a broadcast in some particular frequency, and if you want to hear that particular broadcast, whether it's radio or television or cell phone or whatever, then you have to tune into that frequency. And once you tune into the frequency, you can hear that. So the question is, how can we understand what that frequency of Dharma is? Because Mother wrote a book, Career Dharma. So how can we understand, for us, or in general, what is the frequency? And it's an interesting discussion because one can study the Vedic literatures and not really understand how to resonate, sorry to use that particular word, with that frequency, so the one is satisfied and one is maintained. Because this concept of swadharma not only refers to Brahmins, but refers to each and every one of us that has a swadharma. So if one just reads the Vedic literatures, Shrutina, Vivina, one can be very much confused and bewildered as to what is Dharma. And in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, I believe it's the 3rd chapter, this is very much brought out in a discussion between Yamaraj and the Yamadutas. The Yamadutas seem to understand Shastra very well. I mean, at least have memorized a lot of Shastra. You know, they know a lot of verses. And they've memorized a lot of verses. And so what happened is, the story is, the reason Yamaraj is talking to them is that the Yamadutas tried to capture Ajamil. And Ajamil, of course, as we know, was an extremely sinful person. I mean, he had done so many sinful things, neglected his wife, neglected his parents, God knows what else he did to get money and support his prostitute consort, wife, whatever it was. And so, obviously, there's reactions for such things. You know, there's the law of karma. You know, as you sow, you shall reap. So the Yamadutas understood the law of karma. And basically, they tried to capture him. Then they were stopped by the Vishnudutas. And they were very confused. You know, who are these people? Why are they stopping us? Is Dharma just relative? I mean, isn't there any absolute principle of Dharma? And Yamaraj, in order to instruct them, of course, he didn't quote that particular verse. That's from the Bhagavad Gita 15:15. By all the Vedas, Krishna is to be known. Just like we were quoting from this verse from the Mahabharata. Shrutina Novina. Which means by understanding the Vedas, or studying the Vedas, one will not understand Dharma, but only by Mahajana Yena Gata Sapanta, by following the footsteps of great personality. And what do the great personalities do? They teach us that Dharma ultimately comes, and this is a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How do you understand Dharma? Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. That Dharma can be understood by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is conveyed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead's pure devotees. Not simply by reading the Vedic literatures. I'm just going to read the translation of this particular verse, which is actually 6:3:19. Real religious principles are enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although fully situated in the mode of goodness, even the great rishis, and they certainly know all the Shastras very well, who occupy the topmost planets, cannot ascertain the real religious principles, nor can the demigods or the leaders of Siddha Loka, means the perfected yogic persons in the higher planets, to say nothing of the asuras, ordinary human beings, Vidyadharas, and Charanas. So, very difficult to understand. So, what we're talking about here in this particular verse is something called Varnashram Dharma, which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Chaturvarna Mayashashtam, Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. And as far as this is concerned, it deals with occupational duties, occupational consciousness for all the different varnas. And the 413 in the Bhagavad Gita states this. I'm the origin of this. And so, talking specifically about brahmanas, what is a brahmana? And what is the consciousness of a brahmana? What defines one as a brahmana? And there's a verse from the Brihad Aranayaka Upanishad states, Purana, sorry. Yad etad aksharam gargi viditva smal lokat praiti sa brahmana. O Gargi, it's from the Upanishad, sorry. One who is acquainted with that infallible truth by which one transcends death is a brahmana. One who knows the conclusion of the Vedas, knows how to execute the conclusion of the Vedas is a brahmana. Another verse from the Mundaka Upanishad. Brahma janat siti brahmana. A brahmana is one who knows Brahman. Very simple, like that. So, if you understand Brahman and you follow your Dharma, then Nitya Nityanam Chaitana Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vedadati Kama. You understand that Krishna is maintaining all the living entities. So the Brahman, qualities of a Brahman are listed in the Bhagavad Gita, and also in the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text 42, you have Shamodamak Bhakshotam, Shantir Arjavam Evacha, Gyanavigyanamastikyam, Brahma Karma, Svabhavajam. These are the qualities of a Brahman, which are described as peacefulness, sama, that means just be equal poised and peaceful in all circumstances. Dhamma, self-controlled. Tapa, accepting everything favorable. We usually talk about everything favorable for Krishna consciousness. Rejecting everything unfavorable that's against Krishna consciousness. Cleanliness, which sometimes is translated as purity, because Prabhupada talks about internal cleanliness and external cleanliness. Internal cleanliness is Oma Pavatra Pavitrava Sarva Vashnam Katopiva Yaksmaret Pundarikaksham Sabaya Avyantara Shuchi Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu, always remembering Vishnu, Krishna. And external cleanliness, of course, that's pretty apparent what that means. I was listening to a Prabhupada memory last night, and Rupanuga Prabhu was talking about how Prabhupada gave very specific instructions as far as when to bathe, how to bathe, when you can go into the deity room and when you can go in the kitchen. Very specific cleanliness instructions. And then you have tolerance that a Brahmin has to execute, has to be honest in all circumstances. Cultivate knowledge, study the Shastras, and apply that knowledge, which is vijnana, and religiousness. And so in the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's another interesting verse about the qualities of a Brahmin, which is pretty similar to the verse in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to read this verse, since I don't have this one memorized. Shamo damas tapa shocham santoshta shantirarjavam jnanam daya chutatma om sacham cha brahma lakshanam. That's 7:11:21, in case you're interested. The symptoms of a Brahman are similar symptoms here. Control the senses, control the mind, sorry. That's shamo, being equipoised. Control of the senses, same thing, dhamma or dhammas. Austerity and penance, cleanliness again. And then satisfaction. And another one is added here, forgiveness. It's a very important quality of a Brahmin. Jata Shatra Shanta Sadhava Sadhabhushana. Not having any enemies. If you have an enemy, you're not going to forgive that person. Simplicity, knowledge, mercy, truthfulness, and ultimately complete surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as far as the specific occupations for a Brahmin are yajan, patan, dana, pratigraha. That is doing sacrifice, teaching about sacrifice, and teaching how to worship the deities, studying the Vedic literatures, teaching the Vedic literatures, accepting charity from others, and giving charity to others. So the perfect example of the Bhagavatam of a Brahmin is in the 11th canto we have the Avaduta Brahmin. And he learned from a python how a Brahmin should think about his maintenance. He had, of course, that's the story where he examines I think it's 24 different items, like animals, like pigeons, and learns something, and mountains, and from trees. And from a python, he learns that the python just sits there. Of course, not that a Brahmin should just sit there and wait for food to walk into his mouth. But a Brahmin just depends on Krishna for his personal maintenance. He doesn't make any extraneous endeavor. So another ideal example, so this Avaduta Brahmin was doing that. King Yadu found him just, I guess, lying down, and he looked healthy and he was happy. And the reason many of us are not healthy or happy is we have all these different desires, and we're striving all the time to fulfill the desires. So we're asantushtat instead of santusht. So another ideal example of a Brahmin in the Srimad Bhagavatam is Sudama Brahmin. Sudama Brahmin did not endeavor or sacrifice any of his principles. For example, even though the Supreme Personality of Godhead was his great friend, he never asked anything from the Lord. The only reason he went to see the Lord was to visit his friend, and the only reason, really the instigating factor for him to go see his friend was his wife nagging him. And his, wife was feeling bad that he was, all thin and didn't have adequate clothes. So she told him to go see Krishna. And he went to see Krishna. He offered, of course, this broken rice. And Krishna accepted it. And he blessed Sudama Brahmin. But Sudama Brahmin never asked him for anything. That's interesting. Never asked the Supreme Personality of Godhead for anything. An example of a Brahmin who didn't follow his dharma, who didn't follow what he was supposed to do, is Dronacharya. Dronacharya was interested in his maintenance. Actually, he was put into a particular situation. At least the Mahabharata mentions this, and I think Sridhar Maharaj has a different opinion, but he was put in a situation where even his son, Ashwatthama, could not get any milk. So Ashwatthama's friends, they would actually mix some chalk or some flour or something like that with water and give it to him. And he was in so much anxiety because he didn't get what he thought he deserved. So he actually broke the rules of, or the consciousness of being a Brahmin. And so what he was looking for employment. And a Brahmin one of the qualities of a Brahmin is he should not take employment. Of course, I'm going to talk about something nowadays in a second. So this is not to criticize. Is not to criticize devotees who have employment. I'm going to actually rectify this in a second. So he took employment as a Brahmin. He became employed as a Brahmin for his Brahminical activities. And his Brahminical activities primarily were teaching, which is not bad. Even a Brahmin can teach martial arts. But he was getting paid for it. And because of his getting paid for it, of his depending on this income, because when you depend on a particular source of income, especially for your spiritual activities, then it sort of colors the consciousness. So it's, where, of course, he wasn't really executing spiritual activities. So even though he knew that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though he knew he was on the wrong side of the battle of Kurukshetra, still, because of his feeling ingratiated to Duryodhana and company, so he actually lost his Brahminical stature, and as a result, he got killed. So what do we do as far as, people have to practically function in this material world? It's not that we're saying that someone who has a job has automatically lost or has never gained his spiritual stature. A devotee, a Vaishnava, is a real Brahmin, and actually, Yashasti Bhakti Bhagavacha Kinchana Savar Kunastatra Samasate Sara Arabhavaktasha Kato Mahaguna Manoritane Asate Yavato Vahi, because he has all good qualities and he's dedicating everything to Krishna. So therefore, a devotee in the service of Krishna, in the service of raising a Krishna conscious family, in the service of Prabhupada's mission, then he can do things that, or even take employment, and this is a higher transcendental understanding. So he can take employment and work ostensibly as a Shudra, just like in the beginning days of the movement, to support the temple. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he took a job in the Kodak factory, unrolling or unpacking these little film canisters and putting them into the developing machine, just to support the temple. I mean, ultimately, they discovered that Sankirtan was actually better at raising funds than that. But in any case, and Prabhupada said, the person who is working in the factory, giving the results of his activities up, he's a real renunciate. Not who performs no work or sacrifice or anything or doesn't like that. So one who does yat karoshi yad shlashi yad jahoshi dadasi yat tapashashi kontia tat kurishva madarpanam. So we all have this ritualistic, not all of us, many of us have this ritualistic understanding of what a Brahman is. But for a Vaishnava, there are higher principles. And I'll give one more story about this before we take questions. In the early days of the movement, devotees heard from Prabhupada about the qualities of a Brahmin, qualities of a devotee. And, sometimes Prabhupada would criticize those who work in the factory, day duty, night duty, traveling long distance to go to work. And Prabhupada would call them mudhas. So, the devotees develop this ritualistic concept of what a Brahman is. And sometimes nowadays you find people have this ritualistic concept of what a Brahman is. And so one day, one of the devotees noticed that this is in 26 Second Avenue, that in Prabhupada's apartment, there was a balcony, and the balcony was flooding. And the reason the balcony was flooding was because the drain pipe was blocked on the ground. So there's a drain pipe from the balcony. Every time it rained, it flooded. So this devotee thought, let me just take a shovel and clear out this drain pipe. And the other devotees criticized him. They said, you're acting as a mudha, as a shudra. And they went to Prabhupada and they actually said, this devotee, they didn't say fallen down, but he's acting improperly. And so Prabhupada, of course, corrected them. He told them that, one serves Krishna in a practical way. So that's what a real Brahmanism. Vaishnava is automatically a Brahmin. At the same time, the Vaishnava works hard, doesn't get an anxiety over his maintenance, but does his particular service. So, any questions or comments about any of these points? Yes. Yeah. Obviously, if they're not connecting it to Krishna, if they're doing it for their desires. People have certain needs in this world. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about how we have material needs, or physical needs, and different types of social needs and all these other types of needs. So the idea is not to maximize the acquirement of these needs, but to do what's practical. In other words, for example, if you need a house for your family, then you get something that's not overly ostentatious, or overly, at all ostentatious. Get something that's practical so you can give the majority of your time and the majority of your resources to serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So yes, there is a line. Whether it's a fine line or it's a rough line, there is a line. Yes. Anyone else have any questions? Yes. Vaishnava, that's interesting. Like Prabhupada sometimes would define Vaishnava as pure Vaishnava. I remember and Prabhupada said one should never think of themselves as Vaishnava. One should think of themselves as Gopi Bharta Pada Kamala, Dasa Dasa Dasanu Das, a servant of a servant of a servant of the Lord who maintains the gopis in Vrindavan. So, in other words, a servant of a Vaishnava. So, I think the defining point is that one should, whatever one is doing, again, that verse from the Bhagavad Gita, Yat Karoshi Adanashi Jahoshi Dadasiyat, Yat Pashashi Kontya, Tat Kurishwa Mardarpanam. Whatever one offers, whatever one gives away should be done as an offering to Krishna. If one is trying his best, or her best, to come to that particular level, then they are functioning as a Vaishnava Brahmin. And we have to try our best to come to that level. And anything that can be used in Krishna's service should not be renounced. Renunciation, falgu vairagya, means renouncing things that can be used to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So and we need the association of devotees to actually ascertain, rather than just in our own mind trying to understand what is to be accepted, what is to be rejected. So we have to reveal our mind, dadati pratikudati, guyam akyati prichati. Reveal our minds to others and hear from others and get advice from others. Because if it's just up to our own mind, then we may acquire too much, or we may endeavor too little for things in this world. And we may be bereft of our basic necessities. So Krishna consciousness is very practical. We don't apply the ritualistic concept of Brahman to devotees of the Supreme Personality, or aspiring devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, Mother Emily, you have a question? Yes. Mm. Right. Yeah. At the job. Yeah. Yeah, the whole point is to give the results of one's activities to Krishna according to the direction of the Vaishnavas. Okay, all glories to His divine grace. Namo Vishnu Bhataya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Saminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Muravani Bhaja Nege Nivesesha Shunyavade Pachachagute Satarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaurata Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaurata Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaurata Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaurata Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Sri Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Lokanan, Radha, Lokanan, Radha. Naya Lokanan, Radha, Lokanan, Radha. Naya Radha. Radhe, Radhe, Radhe. Naya Radhe, 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 Naya Radhe. Jai.